Elena Carter had never thought that day would come so soon. Cold winds swept through the military camp at dawn, carrying the familiar scent of dust and metal. She stood still before the flag-draped coffin, her right hand resting on the edge of the lid, fingers trembling slightly even as her whole body tensed like a stone statue. Sergeant Liam Grayson, her best friend, her loyal comrade, the only one who could make her laugh when everything around them was exploding, was gone. Elena had led soldiers, rescued civilians, and crossed the blood-soaked terrain of Mosul and Helmand. She had faced roadside bombs and orphaned children clinging to her legs. But never before had helplessness and emptiness consumed her chest like this moment. Just one day ago, they had been sitting side by side at the base, playing cards, arguing endlessly about which rock band deserved to be called a British legend. They'd promised to find the worst pub in London when they got back, drink the worst beer, and laugh like survivors of a nightmare. And then a blast. A routine mission, an empty street, one brief lapse in attention. Liam never returned. Elena had been the first to reach the scene. She didn't remember how she screamed when she saw his helmet lying on the ground or the blood soaking the shirt with Grayson printed on it. She only remembered dropping to her knees, hands unable to cover the wound. "I'll bring him home." Those words weren't spoken at any ceremony. They were said in a small room behind the military funeral home where Liam's mother sat silently, a photo of her son in front of her. She was a thin woman, eyes long since dried of tears but filled with quiet strength. When she looked into Elena's eyes, Elena knew she wasn't allowed to break her promise. "Don't let a stranger bring him home." Her voice was hoarse. "Liam's not cargo. He's my son." Elena nodded. "I know. And I'll go with him until your hand is on his shoulder again." They didn't need to say anything more. Now, Elena stood at the military base beside the transport aircraft in the cleanest uniform she had ever worn. Her cap was neat, her boots polished, her insignia sharp. But inside, she felt barren. The coffin was lifted by 6 soldiers. Elena followed at the rear, her steps steady, eyes fixed on the flag. She didn't let herself cry. She had made a promise. Liam would not be alone. After hours of flight, Elena and Liam's coffin landed in Germany, a temporary stop before being transferred to a commercial route to the UK. At Frankfurt International Airport, she would transition to a civilian airline as per the approved military plan. Elena descended the aircraft stairs, a duffel bag on her shoulder, military documents in hand, eyes set on the international terminal. She didn't know yet that the hardest part of her promise was only beginning. Frankfurt International Airport bustled like a sleepless city. Crowds moved in waves beneath digital signs, luggage scraping across marble floors, the scent of coffee mixing with loudspeakers announcing flights from around the world. Elena Carter stood amidst the chaos like a cold piece of steel in a rushing stream. She looked at no one, thinking only one thing: Liam is still here. And she had to make sure he didn't get taken away from her. She checked the ticket, gate A27. 90 minutes until departure. More than enough time for one final confirmation. Clutching the military file, escort authorization, letters from the Ministry of Defense, remains transport documents, Elena strode toward the Eurosky Airlines counter. The counter was mostly empty. A female employee with a name ag reading Greta Muller stood behind it, chatting with a colleague, laughing softly, oblivious to the uniformed woman standing in front of her. Elena waited patiently. 1, 2, 3 seconds, then she spoke. "Good afternoon. I'm Lieutenant Elena Carter, escorting a fallen soldier. I need to confirm the transfer procedure upon landing in London." Greta turned, her smile fading. She took the documents, flipped through them mechanically, tapped on the keyboard, and frowned. "Oh," she said, then looked up. "I'm afraid there's a problem." A chill ran down Elena's spine. "What kind of problem?" Greta kept a neutral face, reciting in a flat tone. "According to domestic security policy and special cargo transfer regulations at Heathrow, escorts cannot accompany remains during the layover. Sergeant Grayson will be automatically transferred. You'll be booked on a separate flight to Bristol." Silence. Elena placed both hands on the counter, her voice low and firm. "He's not special cargo. He's a person. And I have permission to accompany him." "I understand," Greta shrugged, "but this is policy from above. I don't have the authority to change it." It felt like a punch to the gut. "I promised his mother. I won't let Liam go alone." "I'm sorry, but if you have a problem, you can file a complaint after your flight." Elena gripped her bag strap tightly, forcing her voice to stay calm. "I want to speak to a supervisor." Greta frowned, clearly uncomfortable being challenged publicly. "They'll tell you the same thing. But fine." She picked up her radio and muttered something into it. While she waited, Elena stepped back from the counter, trying to catch her breath. She had seen comrades screaming in pain in a hail of bullets. She had held a 20-year-old soldier in her arms as he passed, eyes still wide with fear. But she had never felt such cold fury as she did now. Her promise was about to be strangled by a regulation typed in a sterile office by someone who had never had to write a condolence letter. Then a gravelly voice sounded behind her. "You a soldier?" Elena turned around. An old man in his 70s with weathered skin and the tough bearing of a mountain. On his head was a worn-out cap that read Veteran, Desert Storm. "Yes, sir," Elena nodded. "They're not letting you stay with your brother in arms?" "No, sir." "Ridiculous." His voice slow and judgmental. "Let's see how they explain that." He walked straight to the counter, his cane striking the marble with a sharp echo. "Miss," he said, eyes locked on Greta, "are you denying a soldier the right to fulfill her final duty?" Greta opened her mouth, but another voice cut in. "My son also came home in a flag-covered coffin. If it weren't for the soldier who stayed with him, I wouldn't have made it." Everyone turned. A middle-aged woman in black, cradling a neatly folded flag. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady as rock. "I heard everything. And she's doing the right thing." No one spoke. Then came slow, deliberate footsteps. A man in a suit approached, businesslike, silver-haired, holding a boarding pass. "I travel across Europe for work. I've seen your airline switch seats for celebrities, prioritize gold card holders. But you can't honor one promise made to a man who gave his life?" The whole waiting area seemed to hold its breath. Greta froze. She picked up her radio again, her voice now barely audible. "I will call the captain." Frankfurt International Airport pulsed with the energy of a city that never sleeps. People moved in steady streams beneath glowing digital signs, luggage wheels scraping across marble floors, the aroma of coffee mingling with the constant hum of announcements for flights arriving and departing from all corners of the world. Elena Carter stood in the midst of that chaos, like a cold shard of steel cutting through the current. She looked at no one, thought of nothing but a single truth: Liam was still here. And she had to make sure he wouldn't be taken from her. She checked her ticket, gate A27. 90 minutes until departure. More than enough time to double-check everything. Clutching her military file, escort authorization, Ministry of Defense letters, and fallen soldier transport documents, Elena walked briskly toward the Eurosky Airlines counter. The counter was quiet. A female employee with a name tag that read Greta Muller stood behind it, chatting casually with a coworker, smiling faintly, seemingly unaware of the uniformed woman waiting silently in front of her. Elena was patient. 1, 2, 3 seconds, then she spoke. "Good afternoon. I'm Lieutenant Elena Carter. I'm currently escorting a fallen soldier. I need to confirm the transfer procedure upon landing in London." Greta turned, her smile fading. She took the documents, flipped through them with mechanical detachment, tapped at the keyboard, and frowned. "Oh," she said, then looked up. "I'm afraid there's going to be an issue." A chill crept down Elena's spine. "What kind of issue?" Greta's expression didn't change. She read out flatly. "According to domestic security policy and special cargo handling regulations at Heathrow, escorts cannot accompany remains during transit. Sergeant Grayson will be automatically transferred while you'll be rebooked on a separate flight to Bristol." Silence. Elena placed both hands firmly on the counter. Her voice was low, deliberate. "He is not special cargo. He's a human being. And I have permission to stay with him." "I understand," Greta shrugged, "but that's a decision from upper management. I have no authority to override it." It hit Elena like a punch to the gut. "I made a promise to his mother. I won't let Liam travel alone." "I'm sorry. If you'd like to file a complaint, you can do so after your flight." Elena gripped the strap of her bag tighter, holding her voice steady. "I want to speak with a supervisor." Greta frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the growing tension. "They'll tell you the same thing." "But fine." She grabbed her radio and murmured something into it. As she waited, Elena stepped a few paces back from the counter, trying to steady her breath. She had seen comrades scream in agony under a rain of bullets. She had held a 20-year-old soldier in her arms as he passed, his eyes still wide with fear. But never had she felt this kind of icy, choking rage. Her promise, one forged in grief and bound by honor, was about to be smothered by a rule written in some distant office by someone who had never had to pen a death notice. And then a rough voice came from behind her. "You a soldier?" Elena turned around. An elderly man in his 70s, skin weathered like old leather, stood with the firmness of a mountain. On his head sat a faded cap with the words Veteran, Desert Storm, barely legible. "Yes, sir," Elena nodded. "They're not letting you stay with your brother in arms?" "No, sir." "Ridiculous." His voice was slow, deliberate, as if passing judgment on the entire world. Then let's see how they explain this. He marched straight to the counter, cane striking the floor with a sharp, echoing sound that sliced through the ambient noise. "Miss," he said, eyes locking onto Greta, "are you refusing to let a soldier fulfill her final duty?" Greta opened her mouth to speak, but another voice interrupted. "My son also came home in a flag-draped coffin. If a fellow soldier hadn't stayed with him the whole way, I wouldn't have survived it." Everyone turned. A middle-aged woman in black stood nearby, holding a neatly folded flag. Her eyes were red and swollen, but her voice was as steady as stone. "I heard everything. And she's doing the right thing." No one spoke. Then came slow, measured footsteps. A silver-haired man in a business suit stepped forward, boarding pass in hand. "I travel across Europe for work. I've seen your airline move celebrities to first class, prioritize gold card holders. And yet you can't honor a single promise made to a man who gave his life?" The entire waiting area fell into breathless silence. Greta froze. She picked up the radio again, her voice now barely more than a whisper. "I will call the captain." Frankfurt International Airport bustled like a city that never sleeps. Streams of travelers moved relentlessly beneath glowing digital signs, luggage wheels dragging across marble floors, the smell of coffee blending with loudspeaker announcements of arrivals and departures from every corner of the world. Elena Carter stood in the midst of that chaotic current like a shard of cold steel in a rushing stream. She looked at no one, thought of nothing except one thing. Liam is still here, and I must make sure he doesn't get taken from me. She checked her ticket. Gate A27. 90 minutes until departure. More than enough time to confirm everything one last time. Clutching the military file, escort authorization, Ministry of Defense letters, and repatriation documents, Elena walked quickly toward the Eurosky Airlines counter. The counter was nearly empty. A female employee with a name tag that read Greta Mahler stood behind it, chatting with a colleague, laughing softly, entirely unaware of the uniformed woman standing directly in front of her. Elena waited patiently. 1, 2, 3 seconds. Then she spoke. "Good afternoon. I'm Lieutenant Elena Carter, currently assigned to escort a fallen soldier. I need to confirm the transfer process upon arrival in London." Greta turned around, her smile fading. She took the stack of documents, flipped through a few pages like a machine, tapped on the keyboard, and frowned. "Oh," she said, looking up. "I'm afraid there's going to be a problem." Elena felt a chill crawl down her spine. What kind of problem? Greta's face remained unreadable, her tone robotic. According to domestic security protocols and special cargo handling regulations at Heathrow, escorts are not permitted to accompany remains during transit. Sergeant Grayson will be transferred automatically. You will take a separate flight to Bristol. Silence. Elena placed both hands firmly on the counter. Her voice was low and deliberate. "He is not special cargo. He's a person, and I am authorized to travel with him." "I understand," Greta shrugged. "But this is policy from upper management. I can't change it." Felt like being punched in the stomach. "I promised his mother. I won't let Liam go alone." "I'm very sorry, but if you have concerns, you can file a complaint after the flight." Elena's grip on her bag strap tightened. She steadied her voice. "I want to speak with a supervisor." Greta frowned, clearly uncomfortable being challenged in public. "They'll tell you the same thing. But fine." She picked up her radio and muttered something into it. While waiting, Elena took a few steps back from the counter, trying to steady her breath. She had seen comrades scream in pain under a storm of bullets. She had held a 20-year-old soldier in her arms as he slipped away, his eyes wide open in terror. But never had she felt this kind of cold, seething fury. Her promise was about to be choked out by a policy typed up in some climate-controlled office by someone who had never written a condolence letter. Then, a gravelly voice broke the silence behind her. "You military?" Elena turned. An elderly man, perhaps in his 70s, stood there with sun-darkened skin and the firmness of mountain rock. On his head was a faded cap that read Veteran, Desert Storm. "Yes, sir." Elena nodded. "They're not letting you go with your brother in arms?" "No, sir. That's absurd." His voice was slow, as if weighing the world. "Let's see how they explain this." He marched toward the counter, his cane tapping loudly against the marble floor, echoing through the now quiet space. "Miss," he said, locking eyes with Greta. "Are you denying a soldier the right to fulfill her final duty?" Greta opened her mouth to respond, but another voice intervened. "My son also came home in a flag-draped coffin. If a soldier hadn't stayed with him, I wouldn't have survived it." Everyone turned. A middle-aged woman in black stood nearby, clutching a neatly folded flag. Her eyes were red, but her voice was unwavering, like stone. "I heard everything, and she's doing the right thing." No one said a word. Then came slow, steady footsteps. A man in a business suit stepped forward, silver-haired, boarding pass in hand. "I travel across Europe for work. I've seen your airline change seats for celebrities and prioritize gold card holders. And yet, you can't uphold a single promise made to someone who died in service?" The entire waiting area held its breath. Greta stood frozen. She picked up the radio again, her voice noticeably smaller. "I will call the captain." The air near gate A27 seemed to solidify. Greta's eyes flicked across the silent crowd, suit-clad travelers, tourists clutching rolling suitcases. No one shouted. No one protested. It was the silence itself that pressed on her like a weight. From the far end of the corridor, the sound of steady, heavy footsteps echoed. A tall man in full pilot's uniform appeared at the entrance to the jet bridge. The warm ceiling lights glinted off the silver and gold insignia on his shoulders, 3 stripes of command, and a nameplate, Captain Henrik Anderson. He walked up to the counter with the calmness of someone who had flown through thousands of storms, his gaze sharp but not unkind, as if he had seen everything and understood even more. "Lieutenant Carter?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "Yes, Captain." They shook hands. Elena felt the firmness in his grip, not just formality but acknowledgement. "I heard your story from the Flight Command Office. You're requesting to accompany Sergeant Grayson to Bristol?" Elena nodded. "It's not just a request, sir. It's a promise, and I will not let anyone else fulfill it in my place." Captain Anderson didn't need further explanation. He turned to Greta. "I understand the policy, Ms. Muller, but I also know the airline has made exceptions before, and I'm asking for one right now." Greta hesitated. I don't have the authority to approve that. I need to." "You do." He interrupted, his tone calm but cutting. "And I've already contacted headquarters. You'll receive the approval email within the next 3 minutes." Greta stood frozen, speechless. Her cheeks flushed as if scorched by the silent stares behind her. A beat passed. Then Elena heard it, a small but resolute sound, applause. The old veteran was the first. Then the widow. Then the businessman. And then the entire waiting area, from a child perched on a suitcase to an elderly woman leaning on a cane, they all applauded. No one smiled. No one cheered. They simply rose quietly, deliberately. Not for Elena, but for what she stood for, someone who kept her word in a world used to breaking them. Minutes later, Greta returned, her face stiff, bearing the marks of defeat. "Ms. Carter, the authorization has been received. You'll be flying on the same aircraft as Sergeant Grayson." Elena took back her boarding pass and nodded, no thanks, no victory speech. But just as she turned to go, Greta muttered, "Your seat has been changed. Rear row. Next to the toilet." It was a final jab. Petty. Passive-aggressive. The last word of someone who'd lost control. Elena paused for a second, took a breath, and reminded herself. Not worth it. Don't respond. Just finish the promise. She was about to walk toward the gate when the businessman's voice rang out once more. "No," he said. "That seat is mine. She'll take mine too, first class." He held out his ticket to Greta, his gaze cool and unwavering. "Put it in the system." Greta opened her mouth but didn't speak. She quietly re-entered the new assignment. Elena looked at the man, stunned. "You didn't have to do that." "But I wanted to." He smiled. "Because if someone deserves to rest with honor, the one who carries them home deserves to fly in it." Elena Carter boarded the plane through the jet bridge, clutching her newly issued boarding pass, 2A, first class. Every movement felt slow, deliberate, as if each step didn't just bring her closer to a seat but brought Liam one step closer to home. She couldn't recall the last time she flew first class, if ever. But in that moment, she didn't care about the seat. She didn't care about the glass of champagne offered by the flight attendant. All she needed to know was that Liam was down there, in the cargo hold, and he wasn't alone. She stowed her duffel bag in the overhead compartment and sat down. The sun was dipping low outside, amber light slanting through the window in warm, golden beams. She breathed deeply. For the first time that day, her breath didn't tremble. When the cabin was full, passengers settled, and flight attendants began the safety demonstration, something unexpected happened. The cockpit door opened. Captain Henrik Anderson stepped out. No microphone. No theatrics. He stood still for a moment in the aisle, allowing the cabin to notice him. Then he gave a small nod to a flight attendant who turned off the background music and activated the intercom. His voice came over the speakers low and warm, like stone under sunlight. Ladies and gentlemen, before we take off, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge someone special on this flight. The whispers stopped. Passengers lifted their heads. No one moved. On board today is Lieutenant Elena Carter of the British Army. She is performing a duty no policy or manual can fully capture. She is bringing her comrade, Sergeant Liam Grayson, home for the final time. A hush fell over the cabin, dense, reverent, breathless. She did not ask to be honored. She did not request privilege. But I believe today we can stand with her in every sense of the word. He turned slightly, looking toward Elena, sitting still, back straight, eyes wide. Lieutenant Carter, on behalf of this crew, thank you. For what you do. For your resolve. For your honor. For your promise. A long silence. Then a single clap from the economy cabin. The old veteran again, his face solemn, his wrinkled hands striking together with deliberate rhythm. A second clap. The widow, flag in her lap, trembling hands raised, each clap a quiet goodbye. Then a third. A fourth. The entire cabin stood. No chants. No dramatics. Just people. Hearts. Bearing witness to a promise kept. Elena didn't stand. She didn't need to. She simply looked out the window, hiding the shine in her eyes, one hand resting on her lap, clutching the pilot wings Captain Anderson had given her when she boarded. Liam, do you see this? You were never alone. As the aircraft began to taxi, passengers slowly sat down again. No one spoke, but the air had changed. Not silent from lack of sound, but filled with a shared understanding. This was not just a flight. It was a journey with a soul, and at its center, a promise that had never been forgotten. Elena Carter stepped onto the aircraft through the jet bridge, her grip tight around the newly updated boarding pass, 2A, first class. Every movement she made was slow, deliberate, heavy with meaning. As if each step wasn't just bringing her to a seat, but bringing Liam one step closer to home. She couldn't remember the last time she'd flown first class, if ever. But it didn't matter now. She didn't care about the seat or the glass of champagne offered by the attendant. All she needed to know was this. Liam was down there in the cargo hold. And he wasn't alone. She stowed her duffel bag in the overhead compartment and sat down. Outside, the sun was sinking, casting long amber rays through the window. She took a deep breath. For the first time all day, her breath didn't tremble. As the cabin filled and passengers settled, flight attendants began the safety demonstration. Then something unexpected happened. The cockpit door opened. Captain Henrik Anderson stepped out. No microphone. No theatrics. He stood in the aisle for a moment, letting his presence be felt. Then he gave a small nod to the flight attendant, signaling to cut the background music and activate the cabin speakers. His voice came through the intercom, low, steady, warm like stone beneath sunlight. Ladies and gentlemen, before we take off, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge someone special on board today. The whispers stopped. Heads turned. No one moved. Today, among us is Lieutenant Elena Carter of the British Army. She is undertaking a duty no policy or protocol can fully define. She is bringing her comrade, Sergeant Liam Grayson, home for the final time. The cabin fell utterly silent. Not just quiet, but reverent. She didn't ask to be honored. She didn't request privilege. But today, I believe we can stand beside her in every sense of the word. He turned toward Elena, sitting upright, still, her eyes wide. Lieutenant Carter, on behalf of this entire crew, thank you. For what you do. For your resolve. For your honor. For your promise. A long pause followed. Then, a single clap broke the silence. From the economy cabin. The old veteran, his face solemn, his wrinkled hands clapping slowly, deliberately. A second clap. The widow, her folded flag on her lap, her trembling hands raised, each clap a soft farewell. Then a third. A fourth. The entire cabin stood. No shouting. No dramatics. Just people. Hearts. Bearing witness to a promise kept. Elena did not stand. She didn't need to. She gazed out the window, letting the shimmer in her eyes stay hidden. One hand resting on her lap, clutching the pair of pilot wings Captain Anderson had given her before boarding. Liam, do you see this? You were never alone. As the plane began to taxi, passengers slowly took their seats again. No one spoke, but the air had changed. Not silent from the absence of sound, but full, saturated with a shared understanding. This was not just a flight. It was a journey with a soul, and at its center a promise that had never been forgotten. Bristol was shrouded in mist that morning. Light rain trailed down the terminal windows, forming long gray streaks, like memories still clinging to the world, unwilling to fade. Elena Carter stepped off the plane from first class, her boots meeting the ground in a silence that felt almost sacred. Passengers moved aside. They didn't speak, didn't bow their heads, but their eyes followed her as if watching someone who was carrying a soul home. The flight crew had formed two lines at the aircraft door. Captain Anderson stood at the front, giving her a quiet nod. No words of thanks. No goodbyes. That nod was the farewell, respectful, solemn final. A military vehicle waited just outside, engine idling steadily. The cargo bay doors opened slowly as if the plane itself were bowing in farewell. Elena approached as 6 local soldiers lifted Liam's coffin down. She walked beside them, step by step, as if every movement was part of a sacred rite. Rain still fell gently, but no one raised an umbrella. No one interrupted the procession. At the far end of the path leading into the arrivals hall, a group of people stood waiting. Mrs. Margaret Grayson, Liam's mother, wore a dark gray coat and held a handkerchief in one hand. She stood taller than Elena expected. Her face held no more tears. Only a gaze, so deep, Elena felt the air around them slow to match it. Beside her were Liam's younger sister, 2 old friends, an elderly priest, and behind them villagers. Silent. Still. The kind of silence that didn't demand understanding, just presence. Elena came to attention and saluted, crisp and exact. The soldiers transferred Liam's coffin into the military hearse with practiced reverence. Then Margaret Grayson stepped forward, slowly, stopping just before Elena. They looked at each other in a moment that needed no words. Then the mother reached out, not to shake hands, but to hold Elena's, both of hers, enclosing it. Tight. He wasn't alone, was he? She asked, her voice soft, but clear as a chapel bell at dusk. Elena shook her head, tears finally blurring her vision. Never. And you stayed with him to the very end? To the very last heartbeat? Mrs. Grayson nodded faintly. She didn't cry again. Perhaps because she now understood grief doesn't vanish. But it can be shared. As the hearse pulled away from the airport, the group walked behind it in silence. Elena followed closest. No longer in uniform. No orders. No mission. Only a promise fulfilled. She didn't know when the grief would ease, or if it ever would. She didn't know if the nightmares of the battlefield would ever truly leave her. But there was one thing she knew with absolute clarity. Honor is not found in the flag that covers a coffin, but in the way the living bring the fallen home. That evening, back in the modest hotel arranged by the military, Elena opened her duffel bag. From a side pocket, she retrieved a velvet box, the one the flight attendant had handed her, wordlessly, on the plane. She opened it. Inside, nestled in the lining, lay the pair of pilot wings Captain Anderson had given her. The metal glinted softly under the lamplight. She held it in her palm for a long moment. Then gently, she placed it beside a worn photograph of her and Liam, grinning in battle gear, muddy, disheveled, but eyes alight as if death hadn't yet learned their names. Elena whispered, "I brought you home, Grayson. And I kept my word."